Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
We've been talking a lot about changes happening in our community over and over, whether it's from a theater perspective to a scientific breakthrough. Politics has also been one of the big changes that has happened within our communities. People talking about a brand new voice. We've had a series of shows that have showcased all of this, and we've also had a series of shows that highlight prominent individuals in our community. We had 2 College Students of the Year with the National Hispanic Institute come from our very own community. So a lot of things happening, and I thought I'd bring back a lot of the individuals we've had over the course of the last few shows to discuss these changes, what lies ahead. And so who we have joining us today are all prominent members of the National Hispanic Institute who have been on our show in various capacities, depending on what subject matter we were talking about. Joining us, we have Paola Hernandez Payan, who is a member of the National Hispanic Institute, also the College Student of the Year for the National Hispanic Institute this past year. Also joining us is Dr. Joseph Villescas of Villescas Research, Media, and Instruction, prominently involved politically in research and media throughout this community, and also an alumnus of the National Hispanic Institute. We also have Arthur Soto Vasquez, who is the part 2 of the College Student of the Year series duo from our community. He goes to St. Edward, just graduated from St. Edward's University, coming back to El Paso, Texas. And then joining us as well is, well, I call them a dynamic siblings because we have his sister, Rebecca Soto, who in her own right, well, she's been on one of our shows very recently, talking about the scientific breakthroughs she's been behind over at the University of Texas at El Paso, also a prominent member of the National Hispanic Institute. So an NHI roundtable to discuss future, which is what NHI is all about, and to really get into, are things really changing? Guys, I mean, we've been talking about politics in the show. Joseph, you were on the political roundtable that we just had not a long time ago. Then there's scientific breakthroughs that may lead us to new things. Rebecca, you were on that show. A lot of things going on. Arthur, you're coming back to this community. Yes. Paola, you've always been a big champion of the community. What's next?
For this community or for the Institute's alumni?
What's next for our community? Let's begin there, because a lot of things are happening.
With this population specifically?
With this community specifically.
I mean, look around the table, Hector. Like, these are the people that in just a few more years, you will see them in premier positions of power in our community, responsible for the area that covers our community and so on. And we are fortunate, as all of us as being trainers of younger people too, that we're working on growing that next generation that even comes after these young ones. You know, if you really watch it, something was set in motion before we came to the table, and we're just bringing this a little bit further along. But they're the ones doing the work at this point. How many students do you have this summer?
300, 400, something around that.
And what's exciting too is that, you know, as a younger generation, we've grown up this entire time just expecting to be high achievers and really be in our community and give back. And what's, I think, even more exciting as we progress in the future, that these kids that are coming into the NHI right now and are going to be born right now, they're going to grow up into a community that just expects it, where it's normal to be, you know, giving back, to be making scientific breakthroughs, to be adding to the intellectual or economic, political wealth of the community. And that's just something that this community has a lot to look forward to and to get more involved.
And El Paso's always been a key player in that. And I heard you say it the other night, you know, you're right. From the get-go, this is a region that has delivered a supply of talent that the Institute has been able to further harness and hone. And then the shared experience of this population benefits students nationally, internationally, and locally.
You know, one of the interesting things, Joseph, and I think that probably from this roundtable, you and I could probably go back to the very beginnings of some of these discussions. The city was always talking about, I would say around the time that you and I were completing college, about the things that it wanted to focus itself on. It wanted to focus itself on developing an area that would have medical breakthroughs for the Latino Hispano community and maybe diseases that affected the Latino Hispano community. Back then it was a little bit more of a lofty idea with not a lot of sound planning behind it. Well,
And then
now,
Rebecca's here.
now we have Rebecca. You know, Rebecca, you and I have been talking about your amazing project where you identify, you know, this breakthrough, which scientifically is a very big deal that can lead to a lot of changes in a community. We talked about that in our last show. You think that we could come up with some breakthrough things in the fields of science and health and wellness from little old El Paso, Las Cruces?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, it's happening right now as we speak. I mean, like my research team right now, we're studying tuberculosis. I mean, it's very rare that a freshman myself, we get to study tuberculosis on a BSL level 4 lab.
Okay, you're gonna have to clear that up for me because everybody around this table say, going, what is BS level 4?
Okay, it's a biosafety level 4 lab, and
Okay.
so it means like you need top level equipment. If you breathe it, you'll contract the disease.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
So yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's breakthroughs every day
Yeah.
through the El Paso community, and in fact, the virus that I just recently discovered was from El Paso area soil.
That's just, I would have never thought of this. Let me say that. I would have never thought of something like this earlier. I used to
Hold on,
critique it a
But
lot.
what made you believe that it couldn't happen here?
Well, I
That's
don't
the thing. No, that's the thing that I think comes up the most. Why do we assume that it's not possible here? Yet we have time and time again, case after case, of not only the students we've worked with, but the intrinsic talent of this community.
When we have
Because
the
it
physical
often-
assets growing in the soil,
But
basically.
it often happens where the people who are capable of discovering these things leave El Paso.
Well, that's right.
And they
that's
don't want
why.
to come back. And that's the wonderful thing. Rebecca,
Right.
you know, studying at UTEP, and she gets to use the community's resources and the community's people, like her peers, like her research team, to make these discoveries and attribute them to El Paso.
And actually, an interesting thing is too that our program was funded by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute,
Right.
and there's only several select schools, universities that get to participate in this program, and there was only about 75 schools, and UTEP being one of them. And actually, some of the other schools are in predominantly Hispanic communities as well.
See, and this kind of stuff, it fascinates me. It excites me. It inspires me. And I'll tell you what, Joseph, I think Paola is right in that regard. And when you ask me, well, why didn't you think it was possible? It's not that I didn't think it was eventually possible, but back when these things were being talked about, here's the thing that I wouldn't see. There wasn't any sound planning to get to that goal. You know, there weren't the organizations or the mechanisms to cultivate these kinds of individuals and to keep them in El Paso, like Paola was talking about.
Hold on.
Maybe there was community scholars.
I disagree. No.
Okay, all right.
Community scholars is a good example of a group that did try to target students in a particular manner, and prior to community scholars, because it's not that old, you
Right.
know, compared to other groups like, say, a LULAC regionally, or even the original El Paso YLC that was led by Tita Yanar.
Right.
Think about what one person did.
She did a lot for you and me.
For all of
We're
us,
talking
you know,
about our
but set
mentor
something in
growing
motion. And you see that, you know, the leaders are in office today that come out of those efforts from one individual that really did bring together the talents of many families. I think here in El Paso, you know, what we have compared to other regions, there are natural resources that, yes, people drill into their oil reserves, or they dig deep in the mountains and they pull out the silver in northern New Mexico, or the salts in Utah, or what have you. Valuable minerals, literally natural resources. In El Paso, we are surrounded by an abundance of ambient resources that it does take the right kind of eyes to see, and that is the youth of our community, the creativity of our community, and our unique border culture. When we have students on a high school, undergraduate, graduate level that recognize this, near and far, it is that generation and the members, for those who had that vision before, who can tap into it. And they are figuring out ways to do this. And if you watch them, their success will not be individual, unlike previous generations. They will do it as teams. That's what's changed here. These young people will have success not only individually, but collectively, and that investment can benefit El Paso.
And I think one really great thing that the Institute emphasizes is that, I mean, you yourself, Hector, was saying that maybe the vision was there, but the technical skills or the sophistication
The process
were
to get there.
you know, maybe somewhere else. I think the Institute emphasizes that, you know, both things really need to be there, and we're starting to see that, you know, the vision coming together with the capabilities and the infrastructure and the collaboration.
When you
think collaboration's
when you
key. I
take a
think
step
that's the
back
big
at the
one.
Institute's work and you factor in El Paso's role within it, of the entire population of the United States that falls into the same age group of the people that have been served by the Institute, the NHI is starting to account for over 10% of the people with degrees from the Latino community after 30 years of work. Well, but no, the sector, I finished my master's and my doctorate a few years back, but the numbers haven't changed annually about how many, I know, right? I know. Like,
You and I have different definitions.
excuse me, okay. In the last 7 years, anyway, you begin to look at how we have progressed nationally in terms of our degree completion rates. If we're just going to look at that alone.
Right.
And then you look at the success stories of the thousands that are served by the Institute, you know the numbers well, of which over 90% are going to finish their bachelor's degrees and a very large proportion are going to graduate programs. We are creating the intelligentsia that we theorize. It is happening now. What they deliver and what they're able to materialize is what we will get to experience as community elders.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, no, I think that's something that's really important about the NHIs and the NHI community, that everyone who is an NHI, everyone who has gone to an NHI program can't say, I did it by myself. Can't say, this is me and it's only me and it's because I'm great. There's people that you draw on and there's people that you have there to help you. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Joseph Villescas. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Marisa Barrio or Aisha Royster or so many people that help to shape who I am and help to shape, who the people that I've mentored are. Because ultimately,
you have continued that tradition forward. And that tradition of participation, volunteerism, and leadership is normal. And that took years to normalize.
One of the things that I really have appreciated is seeing happen over the course of time, and this is what we need to clue in the audience to. You're talking to a handful of individuals that have been involved with an organization since about 14 years of age, give or take a few, all different generations here around the table in terms of where we're at with our careers. But that being said, there's a common thread amongst all of us here around this table. And the most interesting part to me is that I began the question about, well, what's next for the community? We're talking about the breakthroughs medically and the like. But it's when we talk about NHI now, it's almost like we're having global application now. It's not just local, because for example, we also had Adriana, who's on the show as well. I mean, she just wrote a play about this community, El Paso, Texas, Ciudad Juarez, and it showed to great reviews in Philadelphia, of all places. And now the story of this community is being heard about in places like Philadelphia, in theater arts. I mean, Joseph, you were just involved in politics. We just had a political roundtable not too long ago where we've had the involvement of people like this in various campaigns, from the point of view of a candidate like Mary Gonzalez to the point of view of people just working behind the scenes. I think, Arthur, you volunteered some. I think, Paola, you volunteered
when all of
some
us
as
went
well.
off to vote the other day, like what you saw on that ballot was several actually former NHI participants, former people that were very involved as parents and what have you. And so what was kind of an ambiguous, almost sci-fi vision of the future, if you voted the other day, you saw the manifestation of these efforts over the long run. And what you all are doing is going to make that even that population emerge and be prepared to lead.
And one thing that's the Institute has always emphasized is that, maybe past organizations have just looked as in the politics realm for leaders, as that, an elected official is our community leader. The Institute's always emphasized that leaders can come from any variety of fields, from all walks of life, in sciences, in the arts, in traditional academia, whatever. And so I think the Institute is starting to reflect that, especially within our community. There's a lot of talent, and we can't just look at politics, obviously, as the only source of it either.
And we go back to vision. And vision is something that's contagious. And vision is something that everyone can associate with. Arthur and I were talking about it backstage, and it's something that everyone has. And maybe not everyone has the credentials, and maybe not everyone has the experience, but everyone wants something greater and better for the future. And when you put individuals like NHIers who not only have the vision, but the capability to carry through that vision, then that's contagious, and people want to follow that, and people want to be part of that great change.
And that works in Chicago, that works in the Rio Grande Valley, that works in Panama. I mean, you've seen it. There is a universal application for the model of learning that actually formed, in a very basic level in Central Texas. There's some universal truths and strategies for learning, and in terms of an inspirational model for engagement that includes vision, that includes leadership, but includes authenticity. And when these kids see that early in life, you see a lifetime spent towards seeking out social relevancy and human purpose, to use Ernie's words, and because otherwise you will fall short. When you challenge kids at the very beginning of their academic development to okay, how are you going to shape the world around you? How are you going to alter this trend? And you give them the opportunity to be creative, beginning at that early phase. They will never see that for the most part in a traditional learning environment until maybe the end of their undergraduate years. We accelerate it.
One of the things that strikes me from the conversation and tone around this table is the politics of tearing down versus the politics of building on the future. Yeah. Kind of your guys' take on what has happened here politically. There's a lot of talk about a new voice for El Paso, with people like a Mary Gonzalez, who is an NHIer, and also people like a Beto O'Rourke winning for Congress. There's the subject of a new voice. How do you guys see that playing out? What are your opinions on it? Because there is two very different philosophical houses, if you will, here at play. The politics of just same old political teardown, sabotage, that kind of tactics, maneuvers, and then also just the politics of building on the future. Flesh that out a bit.
I think if we look at the past, the politics of tearing down each other and the almost the cult of individuality really has been detrimental to groups of people. And
here in El Paso,
especially in El Paso, and I mean that's some of the research of social capital, et cetera, right? Moving forward to revitalize our communities and add wealth to it, it's going to have to be a community effort. It takes a whole village.
It's something that's easy for El Paso because of its dual nature. Because we're not, a community that's only, American or solely Hispanic. We're a mixed community, and it's El Paso, Las Cruces, Juarez, and so it's a lot easier for El Paso to appeal to a larger base of people and do something that works for the entire country. Because essentially, we're a microcosm of what's going to happen in
Thank you, Bella.
10, 20 years. I paid attention to when you talked
but
to me.
it is fun. It is true. We're broadcasting from the future. I think I've said that on this show before. This is a preview of what is ahead. And if there is a formula for success among students to be not just leaders and entrepreneurs and philanthropists and people that are leading the way in science, that are redefining multiple fields, I think that's the challenge we need to give kids. And we also have to have a presentation of the border that challenges the stereotypical understanding of what it has to offer them. Here in El Paso and this entire region to Las Cruces and Ciudad Juarez, this landscape is an opportunity for any one of these young people to apply their learning in a manner that doesn't just lead to personal profit, but leads to mutually beneficial outcomes for the entire region. And this population of NHIers, I think, understands the notion of having more impact than simply individual material gain. And that's the thing where collaboration comes together on a broader transnational level, which is very exciting, which I don't think was possible in the 20th century. But nowadays, when you see how they talk and how they continue that dialogue, that is what they're shooting for.
I usually use the term, back when I was on radio, I would use the term naysayers. A lot of naysayers out there. I still remember when there were naysayers to medical breakthroughs in our community. Naysayers to the vision of developing a border health institute in our area, which has now kind of evolved to the University Medical Center. People saying, well, what you've done, Rebecca, in terms of a scientific breakthrough really can't happen in the community, and here's why. And then they would actively work towards tearing that down. I still remember people saying, well, El Paso's not really a good place for theater. It's not a good place where people could come watch and observe because people aren't willing to pay. We still live in an era where people are debating whether or not we should have a sports arena, because can El Paso, who is amongst the top 20 city in the country, actually sustain major league anything? The politics of tear down versus the politics of building on the future. How do you in science, Rebecca, get around a lot of that tear down to build big things like you guys are doing at UTEP? Arthur, you coming back to St. Ed's, from St. Ed's to El Paso, how do you get around a lot of this naysaying to try to build a coalition to have breakthroughs in the community, whether it be politically or in government or whatever it is that you may choose to do, because you were in the social sciences? I mean, Joseph, we've seen this play out over time, but then you have people like Paola who've been involved in the community and trying to kind of build a coalition that's new, that's different, that's not trying to tear itself down or having to battle these battles. What's the roadmap? How do you do it in medicine? How do you do it in it's hard.
Well, generally, I think our generation is just a generation of we want more. And so how do you get more if you're just going to continuously tear yourself down? You know, you want to build up and build up. And, you know, with science especially, science is never finished. You know, it's never just like, okay, throw in the towel, we're done. You know, for the day, it's, you know, every day you go into the lab, it's why did this happen? You know, why did this cell, you know, with something? And so it's easy in science, I believe, to always continue to build up because there's always new questions to be asked.
And I think within our community, we have to commit ourselves to looking out for the people who are interested in becoming invested community members. You know, maybe sometimes we let the naysayers get a little bit too loud in the back of our heads. But at this point now, it's time to just shut them out and look for them and look for the people who actually care.
I feel like that's a little bit harder than you know, just saying let's ignore them. Because when someone has said something for 10, 20 years, and then here comes, you know, Arthur Soto, who's new back to the community and wants to change things, it's not easy to say I was wrong. It's not easy to say, you know, hey, he's actually right and we should listen to him. So it's...
But it's been done.
It's been done.
Yeah. And
But
that's what's
it's
going to
more
come
difficult.
But okay, but now I think this has to do with a previous conversation now. But it is the process of trying to deliver that message and executing some type of apparatus around it that leads to an institution or a movement or something. Whether they succeed or fail at that, this next generation, the challenge that they have, yes, they want everything, and they want it faster and better and what have you.
Yeah. So
But
technologically
it is how
savvy.
quickly can we put them through cycles that will advance their experience level and their capabilities. Because the truth is, they don't just have one individual specialization. They usually have a range. And that mixture of talents is potently just something that's like lightning in a bottle. We can bring them together in a very, very different way.
And that's one very exciting thing I think about the institute that brings different various people. Like, for example, me and my sister can just sit down, you know, at our house and talk about science. And I've had to raise my understanding of science just to be able to have a decent conversation, right?
Keep up with his little sister.
And vice versa as well. And so when we meet people who are interested in theater, for example, I have to educate myself because I'm interested. And I think that if we create that culture where everybody respects each other, and then we can start building stuff on that.
Is it easy to fall into the routine that already exists? For example, you're coming back from college. You're doing something within medicine and within science that is kind of breakthrough. However, there's the established norm, like the mainstream. Is it easy for you guys to just come back and, hey, you know, everybody's engaging in this game of politics. If you really want to get into a race, well, Arthur, here's what you got to do, and here are all the political tricks you have to get involved in. Or
Here are all the people
in
that need to
medicine,
know.
you know, Rebecca, if you really want to get funding for this, you have to really do it this way instead of your way. I mean, you kind of have those scenarios where you're being faced with that as you're coming out of college and into the real world.
Well, and that's when the NHI smarts kick in, and you need to.
NHI.
Well, I mean,
Sounds like spider sense.
right? No, and you need to know exactly, you know, who you are and what you do and stick to it. But you also need to learn how to navigate the system and know that no matter how much you might want to do something your way, there's some things that you've got to do the normal way. And you know, it's all about conceding some points so that you can gain more ground. And if you don't find compromise, then
But
I mean, ultimately, nothing can be done.
I don't disagree with what you're saying in any way.
But?
No. I feel that your age group compared to just people that are 10 years older or 100 years older in this case here.
100 years old.
Yeah, it's such a huge generational difference. No, is that we can't just say, okay, go off to school, get the bachelor's and the master's and the doctorate, whatever it is, all the credentials that you need to be successful. The way, you know, the magic beans that were sold to maybe our generation, you know? The notion that there's like a job waiting for them, you know, is also something that is a myth. What they have to learn is how do they create the opportunities, the firms, the groups, the nonprofit, the organizations on their own. And there's processes that they can learn through that to either be influential in science or politics or in nonprofit domains or any other number of fields. But that's the challenge that they face.
But
That's
I mean,
the skill
exactly.
that needs to be
But
developed.
in order to build, you need to know
how to build it and where to build from and where to build it. I mean,
I think this debate has actually been going on for a while in the Institute, is whether we rely, or at least expose ourselves to higher education, especially graduate school, and getting doctorates or getting professional degrees, or we just throw ourselves out into the real world and experiment in that way.
They get to be the experimental generation.
Yeah.
We get to see what
I
happens.
think there needs to be a
But there's a
healthy
balance. There
mix,
needs to be
though.
a healthy
Exactly.
balance. I mean,
Because there's a
Dr.
larger,
Joseph Villescas would probably not be able to have as many doors open if the doctor wasn't behind that name.
I fundamentally, yes, I agree.
But that's the way the community's organized already. I mean, so it's kind of, I get the healthy balance thing.
Well, no, I agree. But in terms of applying the credential, it is that Latinos get these credentials, but they use them in traditional manners. Get the credential, apply the learning, and make a difference in whatever domain you want to go into.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're down to the last minute, and I'm talking to a bunch of El Pasoans that went away, had different experiences, whether it was with NHI or in college or what have you, and are now beginning to make big inroads in our own community. What's next for each one of you as we go away? And keep in mind, we have about a minute.
Well,
What's next for you?
We have 15 seconds.
I'm still going to continue my research. Actually, I talked to my professor today, and I might open up my own research lab to continue with my research right now. So that's the next step.
That's amazing, Arthur.
One thing about leaving the community for college is that you just aren't physically here. So right now, in between schools or opportunities, I'm going to really just try to get involved and join local organizations, whether it be religious, whether they be social, whether it be the Y, anything like that. Just get involved and start meeting people.
Joseph, what's next?
Continue to expose myself to this generation. We have more to learn from them at this point.
And I think it's continuing to expose myself to my peers and continuing to engage with people like Joseph, like Arthur, like Rebecca, like yourself, because that's really what builds me up and what makes me gain something.
Folks, obviously something big is happening in our community. There's a lot of change in the air, and if you want to get involved with the National Hispanic Institute, just go on to www.nhi-net.org. The organization is getting ready to do its big summer programs throughout this entire summer season. So folks, it's been a pleasure having with you, all of you with us this evening. For all of us at Fronteras, have a great evening. I'm Hector H. Lopez.